Okay. So welcome everyone. And so we're gonna have today's session is sort of like around full stack designer and do you need to be one? I think like we always heard like the hiring manager we see on the job posting. We want like a lot of skills the hiring manager want, and they want they want a designer that can code, that you need to have skills in prototyping or like very good visual designs. So they actually like kind of like want to have like everything equally well, but do you need to be one of the full stack designer or what we call like as unicorn designer in the industry? So a little bit about myself. My name is Peter. I'm a senior product designer at Project 44. I've been there for almost a year now. Before that, I've been working with Clove. I have been working as product team lead. And also my experience is very heavily into product thinking and how to define a product and really take a product from 0 to 1. So yeah, I guess like I want to open up a little bit discussion over here. What is a unicorn designer for you guys? What do you think is a full stack designer?
Guys, feel free to unmute and answer.
Yeah.
This is Kushal, and yeah, I think full stack, like a unicorn designer or full stack designer is someone who can be on so many levels as a designer, logo designing, graphic designing, who can also design website designing, user interface, user experience, user research. I think the whole summary of what a designer can do is summed up in that. If I'm not wrong, correct me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Chiranjeevi.
Yeah.
So, one moment. Yeah, so what I experienced is like when I was there for a job hunt as a UX designer, most of them ask like a full stack designer, like who knows, even they ask for HTML, CSS, and sometimes they ask for, yeah, like high-end yeah, like coding skills and stuff. So along with UI UX. So I think that's something related to this.
I see someone in the chat mentioned as a full stack developer who can look into every part of the development. Full stack designer can be one who can look into every part of designing a product from scratch to the final product. That's a good answer. So I think like we call it as a magical designer who can solve all their problems. So to me, actually, like the product designer is usually a generalist or somehow a little bit in the scope as a full stack designer. Because product design is usually a problem solving that covers the full stack of design. It starts by asking the existing and the big picture questions and listening to the customer and really like understand why and dive into the details for the solution. And also when you are at the final phase, you want to like really crushing the micro portion of that. For example, like pixels, semicolons, or like all the frames, is everything look good for the digital product. So there are actually 6 kind of the major areas in as the core of the product design. So when we are thinking about a full stack designer or like a full stack for the product design, it's usually a designer who are really good at those 6 core. So the first one is going to be like user research. So basically like, can you conducting user research? Can you engage with and observe your target users and really like get into their needs, behaviors, pain points, and relationship to the product as well. Secondly, I think like it's going to be like service design or information architecture. So basically it's like the high level. Can you understand like the overarching workflows? And can you design really like understanding the whole product, how it should interact with each other? And combining is like patterns, logic flows, and information architecture under that as well. Thirdly, it's going to be interaction design. So it's more like around like UX. So for a simple flow, what is the interaction going to look like? How the human is going to interface with the interact with the interface and understand what's on the context. And then going to interface design, which is a lot of like affordance, human factor, consistency, standard, like how you going to use design system, for example, will be part of that as well. And the fifth is content design. To me, I think like content design, like I think like someone gonna say like more around like copywriting or UX copying, but to me, I think it's a little bit larger. Like, can you define different state around that? Can you really good at using icons to communicate the content over there, and also like thinking about error messaging and how to handle that as well. Lastly, it's going to be like visual design. So it will be like really heavily like on aesthetic appealing. So improve a design and product aesthetically based on the visual hierarchy, all the guidelines, space, things like that. However, outside of that, there's actually a super long list that you might see on a lot of like job description. There's many other skills you may need depending on your current position, industry, your career goal, and just like if you want to develop any of the skills along the way. I have listed some of here: design system, prototyping, motion, typography, things like that. But however, outside of it, there's a super long list. If you go online, I think like you can see like 30 different skills will be listed. So jumping to advice over here. So really like when we see such a like a long list and understand like the core skills for product design, the first advice I would give to you guys is actually pick a strength or two. This is very important because like a lot of times you might heard about T-shape designer, right? There are a lot of understanding on the horizontal. However, the vertical part is often overlooked. Knowing a little bit everything is not a unicorn attribute. You have to have a strength, something that you're like really proud of or like very good at. Same thing as like when you are job hunting as well. Even you know a little bit of everything, if you don't have a strength, usually it's very hard to have like a diversity group, have something like you are really good at, means like you can have opinion on one of the industry, one of the skill sets, and then you can really influence others as well. And at the same time, when we are saying T-shape, it doesn't mean you should only like focus the depth in one skill. You can actually develop two or like even three. For example, like for me, I really think I'm really product oriented. So I spend a lot of time in like product thinking. I'm also good at user research and the visual designs. So, and also like I think in my career, I'll also try to develop like other skills and also honing on my vertical as well. The second advice I would give is actually bridge the different skills. So after you honing the strengths, it's really like the time to think about the horizontal part about the T-shape skills. I kind of reverse that a little bit because I think the vertical is like much more important if you are job hunting. However, when you are starting to look at horizontal, I think like you don't need to actually learn all the skills on horizontal, but understanding how other parts is going to work. For example, like coding, understand how code work doesn't make you forget design, or learning about usability testing doesn't diminish your developed skills. However, like if you understand like how to bridge those different skills, for example, like coding or HTML, be more specific, you can understand like what can be built, and you can understand thinking about interaction in a more holistic perspective. So the important part why we mentioned it should be a T-shape, or even like early on, I mentioned product design is actually a full stack designer. What I mean is that you should understand like a little bit knowledge in the other industry and really like use that knowledge into product design. Thirdly, I think is learn more than just coding and design. So a lot of times we only looking at the skills inside tech or just inside design. Oh, I want to do the motion design. I want to learn like a little bit marketing design as well. However, I would really encourage you guys to look outside of just coding and designs. For example, like business, how business are running. What's the business goal? How do you analyze a market? How do you understand, for example, like the strategy for the business? Also on the other side is kind of like the soft skills. How can you present better? How can you be like public speaking? How can you communicate better with the team? To be honest, I think like in the real like working environment, a lot of the time, 70% of the skills are outside of the coding and design. It is just like general professional skills you guys should develop really like along the ways. Cool. So number 4, collaborations. So around collaborations, I think it is kind of like, as a little bit mentioned before, is like part of that soft skill. Most of the cases you will be working with other people. So for example, like other designers, engineers, product owners, analysts. You need that soft skill to work efficiently with others. Even you understand the full knowledge from end to end, you still find like you may want to collaborate with someone really good at visual design, for example, and take feedback from that. Understanding and expertise of the different skill sets, unicorns should be able to develop a deep empathy of people they're working with. There are also many other ways to close that gap as well. So collaboration is really a strong skill to do that. So I'm gonna pause for a second. Do you guys have any questions around those 4 advices I listed over here? And I can jump to either one of them.
We have someone in the chat. According to you, which are the top 3 strengths of unicorn designer? Ask Tejas.
Yeah. I think like that's a great question. So to me, I think the overarching, so basically like understanding the information architecture is very important. And then as the core designer, you definitely need the interaction design skills and research, I would say. So like most of those will capture as a good product designer. However, if you are more looking for like UI perspective, you probably want to hone in more like on visual design, interaction design, those skills as well. So yeah, interface design. Sorry. So I also have Jatin write directly to me. What are some of the skills we can develop other than design? Yeah, so as I mentioned before, I think like one of the really important ones is like understanding the business. So usually the business skills are overlooked, right? So when we are thinking about design, we are only thinking about the user perspective. What does the user experience look like? However, in reality, it's like you need to consider what's the business goal as well, and really massage the business goal into the product thinking as well. For example, like you cannot create a wonderful experience but cannot be profit. That won't exist. Like no one will develop that. So I do think like understanding the business, how the business is running, what is the market look like, what is the product market fit is really important, especially like once you get into the company, you want to learn a little bit more about the industry. And also like even you guys go further in your career, a lot of the times it's like usually some of the designer will stay in one of the industry. For example, like some of the designer are really good at healthcare. Some are more like in finance or commercial or like banks. The reason why is like those industry knowledge, they can understand, oh, how the banks are working, how other stakeholders in this industry are working. Same as the healthcare, like how the suppliers are working, how all the hospitals are working. By understanding that, you can design a much more better experience and product for the stakeholder in that industry. So I do think like industry knowledge is definitely another one. And also like if you are looking for like jobs or looking for industry right now, I also encourage you to learn a little bit like what industry I want to get into, right? For example, like the gaming industry will be very differently from a banking industry or like commercial industry. Like those product design, even like the base logic, how you should interact with users are so different as well.
I think you covered most of the pointers of the next question. How can you improve your user experience research as a full stack designer?
What skills go? I'm handling with. Can you explain that? What skills go? I'm handling with user experience design. Kasha, do you want to explain like a little bit on that, or do you think I already covered that?
Yeah, I think you pretty much covered that. You said the industry knowledge, and then going deep into the information architecture of the product, all that revolves around research, I think, and connecting more with the users. Maybe if it's a healthcare industry, probably with the patients directly, or I think the customer service would also tell you what the pain points are. Yeah, we covered that.
Cool. So Richa, how can you improve your user experience research as a full stack designer? So I do think like user research is a huge part for like any kind of design works. I think like improving user research, a lot of it is like into experience. How do you talk to the customers? How do you pull the data or insights from the interviews? Can you run the session pretty well as well? Like, so I would encourage you to actually practice and just like talk. When you are designing a product, you should always talk frequently to the users and getting their feedbacks. There are like so many stages and like so many framework you can use. Like, I think there's one of the book is like 100 principles for designs. So basically I like introduce 100 exercises in different stage of product design. So you can search that up as well. And also like just thinking about the goal as well, I think it's very important. So a lot of times when I see some of the not so successful sessions, it's because I'm just doing research for the sake of doing research. I don't understand what I'm looking for. So building a plan is super important. Like understand what's the goal, like what do you want to get out from user research sessions, right? What am I validating a product, or am I trying to A/B testing? The goal is like very different between like different stage of the product as well. Also have Kirti mentioned as an experienced designer, how do you keep up with the trends and introduce that into your work? That's a great question. So in my spare time, I usually look into a lot of like different design trends and understanding what are some, I think like other than trends, I look more into what are some new technology can be used for designs, right? For example, in nowadays, like the scrolling or just using the finger is like so much easier, like on iPad instead of like doing before it's like really like vertical scrolling. So I think the trends, depending on what industry are you in, if you are more into like, for example, like gaming, it is more important than to have a like a really on-trend designer, on-trend visual design. So I would encourage you to like look into different magazine, read different blogs, and see like how other peoples are utilizing new design trends. However, if you are go into more like product, like for example, if you are designing for YouTube or Google, it doesn't change a lot, but the how you can interact will change a lot based on how you can interact with that device. And also like thinking about some of the new technology, they may adopt that and how it can be applied to the product as well. So I think that is more important. Yeah.
And is there any industry that you are more keen towards working in?
Yes. So I am in SaaS, so I'm in supply chain industry. Like we are really like thinking about like all different devices in our scenario is like how we can monitor, and visualize shipments, right? Like that, I want to know like how we can pull the data, how we can use, for example, machine learning to pull some of the data out and how we can visualize. So understanding like a little bit like machine learning will help my work, day-to-day work, definitely. Does facilitation skills help to become a full stack designer? How does a mid-level designer start facilitation in the organization? Can you explain a little bit about like what do you mean by facilitation skills, Sai?
Are you referring to a more managerial role?
Yeah.
Sam, you want to clear that?
Yeah, similar to that lines, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think like the manager skills are important. And also usually as you moving more into like staff level, you will start to thinking about like, should I be a manager or like, should I become a more IC? I've been, so in my previous position, I'm actually taking a more manager role and then I switched back to IC. I do think like that's a little bit different than just like a skills. There are some skills with it, like how you can manage people, how you can communicate ideas with different teams. However, more of the choices are like, do you want it to be more IC, so more hands-on, get your hands dirty into design, or do you want to spend more time like managing people, or like communicate with the leadership team, things like that. So I would say, as your career grow, that become more like a choice instead of like real like skills. There are some skills on both sides, right? Like so, if you are choosing individual IC, you probably like want to think more holistically on product. If you want to choose manager, you probably want to pick up like some managing skills. Yeah. Cool. So next question I see is the key difference between strategic experience designer and user experience designer. I never heard about strategic experience designer before, but in my opinion, the title is very confusing nowadays. I have a friend who is like very high level already, and his vision is, I just want to be called as designer. He removed all the like title, like staff, principal, out of his title. He's in Google right now, so he actually made Google like just say, I'm the designer. That's it. So a lot of times I would say the lines will blur. It sounds like strategic experience designer is more in upstream, so like more into the information architecture or overarching structure design versus user experience might be more into interaction interface design. But in reality, there's not much difference. Yeah.
I think that question might have been directed to me because I call myself a strategic experience.
Oh, okay.
So what I would say is I say that for myself just to emphasize to people that I focus equally on the business aspect of things, and then design influence my design. And a user experience probably would be someone who focuses more on the users and then designs the screens. So basically, I think you can call yourself anything, but at the end, just see to that your design is influenced by all the stakeholders that influence the business. So that would be my answer.
Cool. How important is it for a designer to know how to code? Okay, I will wrap it up and I'll jump to the next section because I'm gonna cover that on the next. So I think like the next, I want to touch two questions especially. So those are two questions I got asked a lot as a full stack designer. So the first one is, do I need to learn coding? My opinion is I do think designer working with developer is a necessary step of the process, but I don't think all designers should code. The reason is that there are many ways to prototype and validate ideas. Code is just like another tool. What is really important is being able to communicate those ideas to developers. A designer who can understand the technical complexity or like possibility, like I can chat with my engineer. This should be able to, this is feasible. We may have more efforts, but it is feasible, right? You have a better point to argue with your engineer if you really want some kind of interaction pattern in there. So understanding that technical complexity will definitely help you make better design decision, prioritize, compromise, or even push back appropriately is really worth their weight in the gold. Technical literacy, I would say, is a way more valuable skills than being able to write some CSS, right? So you don't need to learn the detailed coding, but understanding how the framework, how things should be working together, right? And communicating that with cross-functional team is very important as well. And at the same time, why, as a hiring manager, why I think it's a bad idea to ask your designer to write production code. So first, I think like a lot of the designer cannot code. So basically, like if you are posting a job description saying I want some designer who can code, you are limiting your pool of candidates. Secondly, a lot of the startup teams usually are very engineering heavy. The rest of the team are often better at front-end development than any designer, right? In terms of like skills coverage, if you are hiring a designer that can code, you are basically like doubling down on engineering instead of re-understanding and diversify your team and getting other skills on your team. And most importantly, in my opinion, design is a full-time job. If you are asking your designer to code, you are asking them to spend less time designing, studying user, prototyping, and doing all the great stuff that can lead a great product. So you don't need to learn coding, in my opinion, but understanding the framework of that will help your career. Cool. Second one, interaction design or visual design. I got asked this one a lot as well. As I kind of mentioned that a little bit, it is really like upstream of the design or like downstream of the design. If you are working end to end, to be honest, like a lot of times you want both skills. And actually there's a lot of the designer have really strong skills on both areas as well. So I would encourage you guys to really like investigate and understanding, learn a little bit in both areas, but depending on the industry as well, as I mentioned before. So if you want to work into a more complex workflows, figure things out, I want to be like more problem solving and feature heavy product, you probably want to spend more time learning interaction design. If you want to get into industry more like delightful experience or community product, or it is more important to have like a vibe, those kind of product, or like some of the really simple, for example, like Calm, right? They are creating a very simple feature, but the core is like having good visual design to have a consistent feel and look is important. And also I think like outside of just like product design or outside of the kind of the tech, you thinking about like marketing design will definitely more heavy on visual design skills. Awesome. So I do have a quote for you guys. So unicorn, we kind of like reaching at the end. I like want to give a like summarize on this as well. So thinking about the unicorn, as we mentioned today, to me, I think like a unicorn doesn't exist really, and you don't have to be one. The important thing is like really understand what I can be good at. The unicorns are not real. So there's a long list of the skills. Everyone knows that. So don't be crazy. And even though the job description may seem really intimidating, you don't need to be scared of that, right? Like, so understanding what are your strengths are, what you can bring to the team is much more important. So the quote I have over here is like, a good designer will have some skills in most area of the stacks. Usually they will have a deeper interest in particular area and master those skills. However, a great product designer can identify the areas they're strong in and conversely weak in. For the weaker area, they will seek for advice and support, sometimes help building a team to make sure all the gaps are covered. So instead of like really chasing the long list of the skills, learn yourself, right? Like, so what I'm really good at, what I'm weak at, how I can collaborate with other teammates to close those gaps are much more valuable. Yeah. Cool.
That was awesome, Peter. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
We can open up for questions. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we have someone on chat, learning how to code or learning no code tech. What is preferred now?
Yeah. I think, yeah, there's like a lot of chat into no code tech. Depending on like what position you're looking for, like some of the times you may want to do like a little bit like landing website. You can use the no code. I think no code tech is more like a tool to help you to execute your design, right? So I would, and as I mentioned before, you don't really like need to learn coding, but learn a little bit like the framework will help. Yeah.
Guys, do you want to raise your hands and ask questions directly?
Yeah, feel free to jump in and yeah.
Hey, Peter.
Hi.
Earlier you were mentioning about developing your skills in like a T format or a T strategy. I'm a design student, so I've never heard of that concept before. Can you expound on exactly what that is?
Right. Okay. So basically like the T shape, when we mentioned the horizontal means like the end-to-end skills. So you want to know a little bit everything on all the skills along the way, right? You want that full stack knowledge. The vertical means like you are really good at like one area. Like for example, I'm really good at interaction design, or like I'm really good at user research. And as I mentioned before, it's like kind of like a metaphor. You can actually have like more depth. So that is like the skills I'm really strong at. Yeah.
Gotcha. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
There's Jyotika on the chat. She's asking, as a final year design student, what kind of industry do you recommend to apply as a user experience designer?
That's a very hard question. I think like every industry there's a lot of opportunity depending on like how you want to design product. And what I've been like, there are a few like large industry, like for example healthcare, tech, education, right, finance. So I would say spend some time and look into it, and like kind of like find your industry. I think like every industry has like fun problem and really like different ideas in there. It's a little bit different. Like for example, like healthcare is more like serious, and you need to make sure you protect the data privacy. For example, you may want to think about, oh, in the hospital, I don't want to share with other systems, right? Like how that's gonna work. Versus like a gaming, it's going to be like very different as well. So my recommendation is spend some time understanding different industry and like start to get a feel of it. So yeah.
Daniel, do you want to ask your question?
Yes. So hello, Peter.
Yeah.
I'm working as a designer in a smaller team in a startup.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of questions to ask. So the first thing is, working from a startup, I am part of a smaller team. We are only a team of 3 designers. So we take up major responsibilities right from the research to design, prototyping, wireframing, and then testing. Right? So moving forward in my career, how should I pave my path so that I pick up responsibilities in the organization that I work to become a product designer, to become a full stack product? This is my first question.
Yeah.
And my second question is that, so what would be the day-to-day responsibilities of a product designer in a larger team? When I mean a larger design team, they have specific roles and specific people who are responsible for UX research, UX content, interaction design, visual design. So a lot of people doing specific jobs. But as a product designer, to handle all this, what would be my responsibility at a larger organization?
Yeah.
So these are my 2 questions.
Cool. Great questions. So I've been working in kind of like smaller teams and larger teams. I worked in Google before as well for larger teams. I can give my opinion, but also I think like different people will fit into different teams. So a lot of it was connected to your personality and how you want to develop your skills as well. So I would answer it in this perspective. What's the difference between a smaller design team and a larger design team? What you can learn differently? So in a smaller team, you can definitely start to close those gaps in your skills. So you are building a really strong horizontal. And at the same time, it will probably like rely on yourself a little bit, how you can develop that vertical. Because like there probably going to be like a lot of opportunity for you to own a product, but there's not a lot of time to dedicate for you to like really understand, like for example, like how the icon should work, right? So that's the setup for the small team. But in generally, my feeling is like I wouldn't say like super small, like a lone designer in a startup, but I prefer like startup vibe a little bit more, because to me, I think like I grow much faster in those environments. I can own larger product end to end, right? I can take product 0 to 1. Comparing to like Google or like those big giant tech company, a lot of times they are asking you to be more like a screw in the huge machine. So you will spend a lot of time just honing on very niche skills. Like for example, like as mentioned, like just icons, or I'm just doing accessibility design, how I can figure out what type of disabled people are. Like one of my friends are in Google. She is a brilliant designer, but she spent a lot of time understanding how the disabled people interact with the machines. And she came up with ideas like, oh, how I can improve that. What is the accessibility design should be look like? How I can include users into my platform. So I would say you will spend a lot more time in just like a very niche area and understand how that should work. You become a more expertise versus a more like generalist designer. And also like the career in Google is like a little bit different as well. Like, so you will spend, as I mentioned, you're probably going to pair up with other, for example, you want in charge of animation or any kind of UI design. If you are a product design, or they call it interaction design in Google, right? Like, so you actually just do wireframes and hand over someone will do all the visual designs. So it is really like break up a little bit in horizontal and more focus on the vertical.
Yeah, great. This helps. Okay.
Yeah.
So just one more thing. So
Yeah.
as you told, working on a startup, I do love that I'm gaining more experience in a horizontal way, especially being a newbie into design.
Yeah.
One thing that I'm struggling with is I don't have a senior designer in my team who could mentor me or correct me towards. So any tips on how I could, make this work better for me?
Yeah, one thing I forgot to mention is kind of like over that. So I think like finding a mentor is very important. Like, so you want to, like, there's a lot of networking, and also I think design community comparing to other career is more tight, right? We have more, like, for example, like we're doing these sessions today. There's a lot of like sharing and looking to experienced designer, more senior level designer. And you can definitely like find mentors from other company and just like learning from their experience, how I can be a better designer as well. So I would say finding the mentors outside of your organization, chat with them, learn from them. And also like you can share your experience as well. Like, this is what happened in my day-to-day work today, right? Like I'm really frustrated or I'm really excited about the new project. Can you give me any feedback? So that is my advice. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, awesome.
Cool. Do we have any more questions? Or is everybody on their way to become a unicorn already?
Hey
Any
there.
questions? Oh, hi.
Hello.
Hi.
So we can say that a good communicator could be a good unicorn designer because he can make others understand what's the proper design within his mind or on the paper is. Am I right?
Oh, can you repeat that a little bit? I didn't.
A good communicator, a skill of communication a person have, who
Yeah.
can understand, who can make others understand clearly what design is on the paper or in his mind.
Yeah.
Could be a good unicorn designer.
So basically, like you are mentioning, is a good communicator, can communicate what's in his mind and what's on the paper. And
Yes.
is that
Yes,
a
yes.
good, yeah. I think communication skill is very important. Like no matter what career you are, no matter what professional you are in, like occupation you are in, you should always, because like we are constantly collaborate with other teams, right? So I think it's very important in the career, no matter which job path you are taking. And a little bit on the paper part and in the head, I would say like as a designer, we are really good at put what we are visualizing and thinking about onto paper. And also that's why we can collaborate with product manager like better as well. Like I can visualize that product vision. What do we think about the interface should look like? And then also like we can present it to the customers. We can communicate ideas better. So yeah, I definitely
Thanks.
think communication is an important skills. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Cool. Mika, do you want to ask yours?
Yeah, I was just curious in both of y'all's experience working with designers. Is there a part of the design process that you find designers lacking in the most, like a specific area that you wish they knew more in, but it just seems like it's the part of the process that everybody skips over or just doesn't put the most focus on?
Good question. I would say it's actually pretty diverse. At least like if I'm building a team, I would looking for more diversity in my team. Like I want someone really good at visual, someone really good at user research, and kind of like I think like going back to that 6 core skills, you always kind of like want that, right? Like a really
Gotcha.
coverage on the 6 core. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add, Deva?
Me?
Yeah.
From my experience, I've mostly worked in startups where I'm the sole designer or probably have 2 designers working under me. So I think in a startup culture, everybody wants the designers to be fairly strong in almost everything that they can get a designer to work on. So that way, we couldn't really be specialized in a certain part. We can't choose what to work on. So I guess that was really nice for me to explore in my next opportunity. So that's what I've seen till now. So I don't know how it's going to be working with a full group of designers next. We have Chaitanya asking, how can product managers support product designers better?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think product manager is really coming from like a business perspective, like what's the business strategy, what's the business goal? And I think to support a designer better is first is allowing the room to really like vision the product. There's a lot of saying like, oh, we should be design led or engineering first. To me, I think what design lead means are designing department should leading the vision work, right? Should really like thinking about what's the long-term goal, what's the overall product should be look like, what are we trying to achieve in 2 years. And product manager is helping to break that vision into like smaller pieces. And engineering is like really in the execution portion, like how we can figure it out, make it on time, like we are on the first release, right? So that's how I think we cannot work without any of the pillar of those triangle. So the team should definitely like work together on that. But I would say the product manager should be better understanding what's the role for the product designer, allowing the room for the vision, and also helping the product designer understanding the business goal.
Yeah, I think that's a very strong point that you mentioned. Mostly when product managers are present in a company, the designers have no idea about the business aspect, what the business goals are. And the developers are trying to meet the business goals while the designers are designing for the users specifically. So I think if like the business requirements are shared with the designers as well, I think they will be designing better products.
Right.
Any more questions?
Can you also answer the inverse of the same question? How can product designers better communicate with the product managers?
Right. So as a product designer, I think you should spend a little bit of time understanding the business goal, definitely. Like you should not only like waiting the PMs to send you all the business data, you should be more proactive, I would say. Like go ahead, talk to the sales department, talk to the marketing department. Understanding like a little bit how the business is working will help you a lot along the way. And also, I would say working together with the product manager to see what kind of data we can validate our design. Like, what are we trying to achieve? Are we trying to achieve an intention rate going to be raised in the next quarter or next year by X%? Or are we looking more into adoption or conversion? Like, why are we doing this product? So like really understanding first, what's the business goal, how we can achieve those, and also like how this is relating to the user goals is very important. So I think as a designer, you should learn how to balance it out.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah. Cool.
Yes, there is.
I
So
see
the sessions
the
are recorded. It would be there on ADPList YouTube page. And Jonna is asking, as a product designer, does a product designer also need to design physical products?
that well, I know like the industry designer some of the time is called like as product designer as well. So I think like in our chat mostly it's like digital or like software. So yeah, not really.
So we can take 2 more questions and we can wrap up the session. If someone has a question to ask, now is the time. Okay, Chaitanya has quite a few questions, and the question is, how should designers get to understand a new industry when they transition from one to another?
Right. So I would say the onboarding experience is very important. So I think like definitely utilize your onboarding period. Like usually the company will give you probably like 2 weeks to a month for you to learn how the industry will work. I would say my opinion is like spending a little bit more time doing more one-on-one will definitely help. And this is another huge topic, how to do effective one-on-one. I think like in the company, you should learn like how to chat with other departments as well. So on my onboarding experience, I usually reach out, for example, like to sales, to customer success team, or like to some of the engineering lead, right? I would say like, do you have some time? I want to grab a coffee with you and just like 15 or like 20 minutes, understanding what is their position, what they're doing. And at the end of the day, it's always nice to have a bestie in another department, because like some of the times you want to reach out to certain customers. Like it's always nice to have someone in the customer success team, for example, right? Yeah. Cool. I see Shalini asking what would be your advice for someone working on MVP design? Are you thinking about like the MVP for the product, or are you thinking more like how I can translate MVP into the future phase as well?
For the product currently.
So I think like if you are defining an MVP, really like thinking about, you should do more like feature prioritization, and it should be with the team. So I would say like understanding the constraints, like what is not feasible, like what we cannot build today, right? Like, and also I think like thinking about some of the limitation, for example, like we don't have the funds for how long? What's the time constraint look like? When we need to deliver this? That's going to be like first understanding some of the constraints, some of the assumptions. Secondly, I would say MVP should still be a holistic experience. Like thinking about a car, like that's a great example. Like what is MVP design? It's not saying when we are start to build a car, build just a wheel, right? Like build a wheel really well. That's not going to move anywhere. You should start with a bicycle or something like that. And then you should add a wheel on top of that. So I would say defining the MVP, defining scope is very important. At the same time, you should really thinking about a coherent experience. Like the user should finish their life cycle inside their experience. It shouldn't be broken. That is very important.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I just want to add on to the same question. So I had experience working on the MVP and then progressing from the MVP once. Some problem I faced was in the MVP, we had built only based on the requirements, right? Keeping it minimal. But then when we needed to scale and proceed, some designs I had to rework on the whole thing, and it was also extra work on the engineering. So what terms should we think of when building the MVP? Like thinking the future in the mind, like the scalability part of it in terms of design.
Yeah. So in my opinion, like usually design should be way ahead of engineering. So like you guys should at least have 2 cycles ahead of engineering. So when you are thinking, like even early on, so for example, I recently just kicked off a large project, right? It's huge scope. I did like couple workshop with engineering. I grabbed them into the workshop and saying, hey, this is the vision. I already developed a vision for that. So like, this is the vision, what we're gonna work on. However, how can we have a smaller scope? What is the smaller scope look like? What are some must-have? At the same time, as we are scoping out the must-have, we are thinking about nice-to-have as well. So I already starting to thinking about, okay, so from that must-have, how we can grow into nice-to-have, and how we can even grow into future, right? So you're starting like, I think it should start early instead of like I'm already developing the MVP and now I'm thinking the next phase. That's going to be harder because like you don't have a North Star to chasing for, right? Like you don't have a goal for the holistic project. I think understanding the real like overarching and understanding the larger scale is important, and break that down backwards into the MVP.
So do you think we would be able to do that through design sprints even before we start working on the MVP?
Yeah, I think so. So I think like either like design sprint, or I think like a lot of time collaboration sessions also help, like working with other designer PMs, right? Or like thinking about some of the long-term user goals, like for example, how I want to scale my product, right? Like I might want to get into another service, or like how I can improve that experience a little bit more. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And
I also see Daniel was asking what's the middle ground between business and user in terms of decision making in design. I would say there are always compromises, and really like that depending on the balance between balance, right? Like so how so I would say like business, you should understand what's the constraint, what's the goal, right? Like as the company, I want to make more money, but some of the times the user experience should help, right? Like that should not be always like against each other. Like if I make the user happy, I will make more money. So I think finding the balance means like finding those mutual grounds, like where I can bring more value to the user, and at the same time, I can bring more value to my business as well. And some of the time, the business goal might coming from like a leadership team. So you may thinking about, oh, we're thinking moving to this industry. So like I would say, do the research, it's gonna help. If we're, for example, like as a business, as we're thinking maybe that's a good area to invest into. Are the user really using it that way? One of the example I hear about is like Google Pay or Google Wallet. So they are really trying to achieve that because like they reach a huge success in India. They're trying to copy that from India, same to the North America, to the US. However, US is very different user behavior. To my opinion, they didn't do enough like user research and validate that, because we already have a credit card, we already have a Square, we already have like Apple Pay. So they reaching such a hard time to implement that in US because they don't have enough user validation into that. So understanding the business, right? Like understanding this is a move we're trying to achieve. However, like spending more time doing validation and user research will definitely help you reach into that balance.
That was well said.
Yeah.
I think we can take one last question from Siva, who asks, I'm currently in a position to jump from a startup to a mid-tier company. What would be your advice to improve the HR's view on my portfolio?
Good question. My question would like that's a little bit hard to answer. I would say like, what goal are you trying to achieve and what level are you trying to achieve? Yeah. But I can answer like a little bit. So I would say from startup, usually it's like a solo designer. So I think like one of the key skills, I think like probably a larger team we're looking for is like, are you good at collaboration? What's your personality fit gonna look like, right? Can you work with others? So I would say if you can showcase that, I collaborate with other team, I'm a really good communicator, I can work with my manager in certain ways, that's gonna definitely help in the HR perspective.
Cool. If no one else has a question, I think I'm gonna wrap up the session.
Cool. Well, it's very nice to meet you guys. It's great chatting with you. Thank you all.
Thanks, Peter, as well, for getting into the topic broadly and in depth, like our T format, and giving us the slight edge to be a better designer. You can contact with Peter through LinkedIn, through ADP, and do send in your feedbacks for upcoming session. If you have a topic in mind, I would love to get speakers to talk about that. And finally, we have the Sunday ritual of question and answers at DesignBoat, which is a UI UX bootcamp. So register for that through the website. Thanks everybody for attending, and thanks, Peter. You were great.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Thanks
Bye.
a lot.